and that associated webinar was the second most watched webinar in MEF's 22-year history.
Well, so you know where it hurts. Topic.
So, yeah, and that's what the members were saying. So it's neither good nor bad. It's just another means of authentication. And like everything, as long as you have that visibility and are able to control it, you can then decide what to do. Do we bury it, or do we monetize it?
True.
And so that's what MEF members generally have been saying.
Indeed. Yeah, to us, we are software guys, we are solution providers, and to us, all means of authentication are fully equal. I mean, we are truly democratic here.
And that's a really, really good point. Dax, coming from yourself, clearly the SMS side of things is strong. Is there room? We've all been talking so far as if the days of SMS being used for authentication days are numbered because of pressure from other areas. What about, and it was talked about on the first panel, and I'll be talking about it this afternoon on one of my panels for sure, the growth, because there are surely millions of organizations here in India, never mind the world, who are not using any real means of two-factor authentication beyond email. It was mentioned by Shika as well, from Airtel, about the email side of things, and other speakers were talking about email being used still. And email actually, by transaction number, is still the largest single channel in the world. It's only when you add SMS and chat apps together does that become larger than email. So do you think there really is growth for SMS here in India for two-factor authentication?
Of course, yes. There is, I think, in my opinion, there are multiple authentication processes are available. But two-factor authentication, when you are talking about voice calls, it is just an instant call to your voice mobile number of a user. And that will come and go. But you can see only in your phone log as a missed call. That one benefit is that there will be no charge. No costing will be added to this. But one thing is that MNO should go with this, and they can share some firewall also, so prevent these are all security, and they can provide security to users, then enterprises and all.
So you agree?
So in that case, I think the people who are afraid that voice flash is not that much acceptable in next couple of years. It may be possible, like in Juniper, I think last couple of years, they have researched there 2021, it was 60 million volume for voice flash. And they have expected by 2026-27, it will be 130 million.
Yeah, that's bigger. But you would accept, you agree with Andre that every channel should be viewed as being neutral, and there is neither a channel which is good nor bad ultimately. It's just how it's used and when and for which audience. Because we've got to accept, surely, that not every person has access to the internet or mobile data and a smartphone. And so much of the world talks as if everyone has that. And the reality is, even in so-called developed countries like the UK, the amount of times I don't have reliable signal on my phone, it's, let's say, it happens regularly. So this is where SMS comes into its own. But Rashmi, we touched upon the issue of biometrics and things like that. Are biometrics and other authentication means like that used a lot here in India yet? What's happening?
Well, James, it's not being used much in India right now, but it's being like we are moving towards that, wherein we are analyzing the biometric behavior of the person. Like, they are basically...
It's the behavior. It's not my fingerprint as such. It's more the behavior pattern.
Yes. So that is, I was just reading one case study wherein it's not from India, but it is a case study which we can actually have a look at and can have something like that in India as well. So it was like, there were so many frauds that were happening in US, wherein the banks, once they were onboarding their customers, like in that process of onboarding, the fraudsters were getting information from the customer, and they were actually able to get a lot of money transferred to their account, right? So what they did, they came up with a BioCatch sort of application. So what it did, it used to analyze the behavior of the person, right? How they move, how the cursor dynamics, the keystroke dynamics, you know, the place that they are in. So they actually analyzed around 2,500 data points, and then they found, like initially, like the case study says, you know, once, like in 1 week of the implementation of BioCatch application, they could actually set alarm to around 300 cases there in US. They could save around $300 million of money. And it was around, you know, the transaction that happened, 100 cases were such which were like they could have been taken care of because of that. So basically what I mean to say is, from the traditional way of authenticating people, wherein it was something you know, which is the knowledge, wherein you have the password, or you have something like um, the question, the secret question that you have, to something that you possess, which is the device of the people, like you have mobile phone or the laptop, to something which you are, like the biometrics. So it is like, you know, we can't think of everything in silos. It is to be a fusion of, you know, all or maybe two. So you have the password, you have the device, and you have some, say, voice analytics of that person. You know how the person moves, from which place he is doing most of the transactions. So those parameters should also be taken care of once you're authenticating the user.
Andre, what about the rise of the false positive? I'm going to be hosting an event next week in Dublin, another MEF event, business messaging, and there's a session about exactly that. Because with more fraud, then it can get very, very tempting to perhaps get a little bit too harsh in your protection methods. And it's not just disrupting the customer experience, it's destroying the customer experience. Are you seeing, it could be personally yourself as an individual subscriber, or generally with your clients, or you're feeling from, because I know you go to, your team certainly, you go to many industry events around the world. Are you seeing this risk, or this becoming real, the false positive?
Yes, absolutely, because in our product line we have an SMS firewall. So your question, we have been asking ourselves quite a few times. How to prevent the false positive answers, the false positive blocking of like good messages. One of the possible answers is using the artificial intelligence, the self-learning, like self-learning machine, self-learning engine that we, human beings, would feed with the correct examples more and more and more, showing more and more details of like proven good messages, and making it understand the very small particular details of like good messages, and making it able to differentiate between good and bad. Well, we ourselves don't always manage to do that, but anyway. Yes, so that's one of the possible directions as we see it, but again, the artificial intelligence is something that should be handled with care, with great care. So we are yet to live and see whether or not it's going to be the final answer. Probably not.
Ajit, what's your take on artificial intelligence?
Yeah, today that's, I think, the hot topic, right? Italy just banning ChatGPT, and Europe following suit. UK is also trying to get some acts in place. So I think AI is obviously there to stay. This is going to be a transition. It will never be a straight line. It will be having, you know, troughs and crests. But then I think more and more companies are relying on AI and AI-driven technologies to prevent frauds. It's not only with regards to the authentication, even with you know, SEIM tools for network log monitoring. Everywhere, you know, we are using AI because there's a human limitation.
But Ajit, is it really AI, or isn't it just big data?
No, so it is a combination of both. You know, it's a combination of both, where you do have you know, ML plus AI involved, where you make the system learn over a period of time. At the same time, the fact that you are now able to do edge computing, whereas you are able to derive data points from the edge rather than waiting for the data to come 2 days later. By then it is too little too late. So right at the edge where the act was done, you collect the data and you immediately detect a potential fraud rather than reacting after a fraud has occurred, right? So as Rashmi rightly said, today, we in India, there are a lot of frauds that are happening where, a slightly less educated person is put into a corner by a fraudster who says that, please share an OTP that you have just received on your mobile, right? And you end up clicking a link or sharing that OTP. So then in that case, even that two-factor authentication fails because you now ended up sharing OTP. So therefore, biometrics come into play, right? So but then in biometrics also there's a failure. Like just yesterday I was reading a news where a family was trying to take a thumb impression of a dead lady on a will, right? After she passed away, right? There it was flashed all over, and there were photographs in the big papers. So now what do you do with that, right? So now the next thing is where, as Rashmi also pointed out, where now the way we type, the pressure with which we type, right? The speed with which we type, the speed with which we talk, the voice analytics part. So all those things are now being used where AI and ML comes into play big time. And all this thing is done with big data, right? And that is how you're trying to prevent fraud. And I think the mantra always is prevention better than cure. So you try to preempt something rather than trying to actually solve the problem later on when it's too little too late.
I see that in the UK as well. So I've got an HSBC account, and my PIN is literally, my voice is my password. That's what I've got to say. So it'll be the speed at which I'm saying it, everything going into that. Dax, rich messaging. So we know what happened last May to RCS, or rich business messaging. So that service was stopped.